Hello everyone. So, today we will be continuing from our last lecture, that is property rights and Coase theorem. So, in last lecture we discussed what is property rights and what is optimal level of externalities. So, today we will be continuing from this, and in addition we will be discussing the Coase theorem. So, before discussing what is the necessity of Coase theorem, I just want to put forth the very question that we are posing, that how to internalize the externalities, because we are saying in almost all cases we are facing the presence of externalities. So, in that case the greatest challenge is how to internalize the externalities or how to reach the social optimum, right. So, in this case, even though there is no market mechanisms, or even if the markets may not secure the optimum amount of externalities, this optimum amount of externalities can slowly be nudged in these very directions without the involvement of the government. Generally we are saying that when there is some externalities, government must interfere through different mechanisms or instruments like taxes or subsidies. But even the government is not interfering, and we can also move towards the social optimum, and we can internalize the externalities. So, that is the very gist of the Coase theorem. Now, let us discuss this Coase theorem in detail. So, as you understand that what is the how to define this optimal level of externality, and that is what the social desirable externality level, and that is why the challenge is to achieve the optimal level of externalities. And Coase tried to show that how this optimal externality can be achieved without the intervention of the government itself. So, he delineated his thoughts in the problem of social cost, which was published in 1960, and because of which he got this Nobel Prize in economic sciences. And when the Nobel committee cited that the two most important articles by Coase, Ronald Coase, it was on the nature of the farm, which was published in 1937, along with the problem of social cost, which was published in 1960. So, basically the second one, the problem of social cost, it talks about that if there is no transaction cost, then the private parties, they can bargain and negotiate to internalize the externalities without even the intervention of the government itself. And because of this thought, that how these transactions, if there is no transaction cost and there is the bargaining and negotiations among or between the private parties, that can lead to the social optimal externalities. Because of this idea, he bagged this Nobel Prize in economic sciences in 1991, right. And there the very assumption he has taken is property rights must be well defined, and because of this well defined property rights, the institutional structure must be well fitted. So, he proposed this idea that when the property rights are well defined and the problems of externalities can be prevented, but here the condition is that the property rights. So, he proposed this very idea that in case of the property rights are well defined, then the problem of externalities can be prevented easily. And based on this idea, he thought about a market bargains, that how private parties, those who are creating the externalities and those who are suffering from these externalities, they can come together, because it is assumed there is no transaction cost. They can negotiate and bargain, and thereby both of them, they can actually get this social optimal externalities. So, now let us think about this potential market bargains, right. So, there we can actually argue about if the victim is having the property right, then how this achievement of optimal externality can be possible. And the second bargain scenario is if the polluter has the property right, then in that case how this optimal externality can be achieved. So, now let us talk these two scenarios. So, before talking about the two scenarios, we need to assume the conditions. So, what are the very assumptions that we must take into account for this Coase theorem? The first one is that the producers or consumers, they are subject to externalities, right. So, that means the externalities is a must when you are producing or consuming, and that is why the because of your activity the second consumer or second producer, they are suffering. And the second assumption, it has been taken the case of perfect informations, that means it is a kind of perfect competitive market situation prevailing, and everyone is having the equal informations or perfect informations. So, the consumers and producers are here the price takers, because we have already assumed the case of the perfectly competitive market scenarios. And moreover, it is also assumed that the legal process or like your courts, it is a costless process for enforcing the agreements, and it also argues that there is no transaction cost for this negotiation and bargaining. And moreover, it also takes into account the basic microeconomics principles that producers, they always try to maximize the profits, and the consumers, they will be trying to maximize their level of satisfaction in terms of utility. So, these are the broad assumptions the theory has taken into account. Based on this assumption, now let us have these two scenarios. So, what is the bargaining scenario? The first bargaining scenario is that if the victim has the property right. So, what is the scenario now? We are saying that there are two parties, one is the producer, right, that is the polluter, and the second one is the victim. Because of producer's activity, that is in terms of pollution, the second person is victimized or suffering from the externality or pollutions. So, now we are saying that if the property right is held by the victim itself, then how the bargaining process or negotiation process will be carried forward, and how these optimal externalities can be achieved. So, when we are assuming this case that the victim has the property right, so that means that the victim has the right not to be polluted. The victim cannot allow any kind of pollutions, because he has or she has the property right, and the polluter or the producer, he does not have any property right to pollute. So, this is how the very meaning of the scenario. So, when the victim has the property right and it has the right not to be polluted, then obviously the victim will not prefer any pollution to take place. He will not be allowing any pollution to take place by the polluter itself, right. So, if this is the case, now the question is that whether any kind of potential bargain is feasible or not, right. So, for this reason, let us understand the bargain. So, what is the bargain? We can actually display this by using a graph. So, as you understand, we are just taking the similar graph from the externality itself. So, in the horizontal axis, we are measuring the output or economic activity, or output, right, and in the vertical axis we are measuring the cost, price and benefits, okay. And we have already discussed that this is your marginal net private benefit curve and this is the marginal external cost curve. Okay. So, let me just draw this diagram, then we will be explaining and interpreting it. This is Q star, right. So, this is the point at which at point E the marginal external cost curve and the marginal net private benefit curve, they intersect each other, right. And as a result, this Q star social optimum level of output and pollution is produced. Okay. So, now we will be taking another 2 points. Let us say the point D and point E. Okay. And here after this level of social level of production, we can have another 2 point. Let us say this is point G and this is point F. Right. This is I point. Okay. So, now we can interpret this diagram. So, if the producer or polluter is left unregulated, that means there is no regulation in the production activities of the producer or it is also the polluter itself, then obviously the polluter will be trying to operate at the maximum level of production point, that is Q pi or Q max point, right, where for the private benefit or for the polluter itself, its private benefit or profits will be maximized, right. And why we are saying there will be at this point the profit for the polluter will be maximized? You can see this diagram. This is the marginal net private benefit, right. So, this is nothing but the revenue the firm is getting. So, the area under this marginal net private benefit, it is the benefits to the polluter itself, right. So, when the polluter is expanding its production from 0 level of output to Q pi level of output, the profits will be getting increased more and more, right. So, that is why if there is no regulation on the production level and the generation of pollution level, then the firm or the polluter will be interested to produce at Q pi or Q max level of output, right. So, here we are assuming that when the producer is producing its output, then it is also producing or generating the pollutions. So, more output means more pollutions. Okay. And so far the social optimum level of production and social optimum level of pollution is concerned, it is at this Q star level that we have already discussed in optimal externality discussions, right. So, if the socially desirable or socially optimum level of pollution and production is Q star level, but the firm is interested to produce at this Q pi level, then both these scenarios are incompatible, right. So, that means this is the point at which the individual or private polluter he is interested to produce, and this is the level that the society wants this much of pollution and production is desirable, right. So, in this case, because they are actually two different things, so they are incompatible. So, the question is that if there is any bargain possible here. So, if there is bargain over this level of externalities, right. So, the question we are saying that if there is any bargain and that is the possible bargain is there, then we will be saying that will they, both the polluter and victim, they will move to any point like D. So, in this case, what is our assumptions? What is the scenario? The scenario is that here the victim has the property right and the polluter does not have any right to pollute, right. So, now if the victim is allowing the polluter to produce, then only the polluter can produce. So, in this case, if the polluter is moving from 0 production, that means 0 pollution, to the production level at point D, then what is the gain for the polluter? So, the polluter, so if the polluter is moving from 0 point to D point, then the polluter will be gaining what amount? This is the amount. This is defined as the area under this marginal net private benefit up to this D point, right. So, that means this is the benefit of profit to the polluter. And what about the externality or pollution? That the victim is going to take. So, this is defined as this triangle, that is O, C, D area is the loss to the victim who is going to suffer from this pollution in case the polluter is producing at D level of output, right. So, that is why you can say the victim will be losing this OCD amount of output or benefit. So, he will be losing OCD. So, now you will be saying that what is the bargain? If the polluter or the producer is moving from 0 production to the production at D point, then the polluter will be gaining by this OABD amount of area, right, and the victim, he will be suffering from a loss, that is OCD area. So, now the question is that is there any bargain or can there be a bargain? So, you can just see the cost benefit. So, what is the benefit to the polluter? OABD area and loss is OCD. Obviously, OABD area is greater than this OCD area. So, in this case, the polluter can compensate because this area, his profit is more than the loss victim is suffering. So, that is why what the polluter can do in order to continue his production at D level of output, he can compensate the victim, right. Now, the question is that if the polluter is going to compensate the victim, what would be the amount of compensation, right. So, this amount must be more than the loss, that is. So, now the compensation amount should be greater than this OCD area and it must be less than this benefit, that is OABD benefit that the polluter is getting. Now, we are saying the bargain is feasible because this bargaining amount must be greater than this OECD amount, but it must be less than the OABD amount. So, if this situation, the conditions are satisfied, then this bargain is possible or negotiation will be possible for both of the parties. Again why? Because in this case, even though the polluter is compensating the victim, right, by taking these conditions, then still the producer or polluter, he is also going to have a net benefit, because he is just paying OCD and his gain from this activity at this D point is OABD. So, what is the net gain? OABD minus OCD. So, still the polluter will be having this net benefit or net profit, and victim is also equally better off, right. Now, remember the Pareto optimality conditions. So, as per the Pareto optimality conditions, this is a better situation or Pareto improvement is there if the production is moved from no production 0 point to point D. Okay. So, similarly, we can also take another point next to this point, right. So, if D is potentially feasible, that means it is a Pareto improvement conditions, right. So, both the parties they will be benefited and no one is going to be affected adversely. So, by taking this same, by making the same logic, we can say the polluter, he can also move to point E by following the same logic, and also he can this move to Q star point is also feasible if the bargaining between these two parties happens. So, as a result, what will happen, this Q star level, that is what is defined as the social improvement, right, that is the desirable, socially desirable level of output, this is possible, right. So, in this way, by compensating to the victim, the polluter can expand its production from 0 level of output to Q star level of output, and both the parties, the polluter as well as the victim, they can be better off. Okay. But however, if the polluter is targeting to move beyond this socially desirable level of output, that is Q star, it is not feasible. Why it is not feasible? You can just remember that in our discussion we talked about that this is the marginal external cost curve. I am just redrawing, right. This is marginal net private benefit. This is the same graph we are taking. This is the intersection point, and as a result Q star socially desirable level of output, this is G and this is F, Q phi or Q max, this is H. Okay. So, now the question is that the producer can move from point 0 output to Q star output, and in this case both the polluter and the victim, they will be benefited, although the property right is held by the victim itself. So, it is possible through bargaining and negotiation, and the polluter is compensating the victim itself. Now, the question is that whether by the same logic can the producer also move beyond the Q star, let us say G, whether this is feasible or not. This is not feasible. Why it is not feasible? Because see, at this point G star, G level of output, if the producer is thinking to produce, what is the benefit that the producer is going to make? This is this level of benefit, right. And what is the cost? Cost is more than that because it is the extra one, marginal external cost, which the victim is suffering. So, that means at this point if the benefit is this much and the cost is this much, then obviously the polluter cannot compensate the victim, and that is why the bargain is not feasible at the point like G or F or likewise after the Q star point, right. So, what we can deduce? So, we can now conclude if you start at point 0, that is no production, and the property right is held with the victim itself, then there is a natural tendency to move to the Q star level of output, that is the social optimum level of output and social optimum level of externalities as well, right. So, now let us talk about the second scenario. So, what is the second scenario? That if the polluter has the property right. So, in earlier case, in the first case we talked about if the victim is having the this property right, then whether the bargain is feasible or not. Bargain is feasible, but up to a point, which point? The point of social optimality, right. So, similarly now we will be talking about whether the bargain is feasible if the property right is held by the polluter itself, and to what extent, right. We are continuing with the same graph. So, now we will be starting from not 0 point, but this is your marginal external cost and this is your marginal net private benefit, right. This is Q star, this is Q pi or Q max, okay. This is A, this is F. Okay. So, now what we are saying that if the property right is held by the polluter itself, then obviously the polluter has the right to pollute. If the polluter has the right to pollute, then he will be thinking of producing at that point where he is getting the where the benefit is maximum. So, this is the point at which he is getting the maximum benefits, that is Q star, Q pi or Q max level of output. So, that is why now the producer will be or the polluter will be starting from this Q pi point, right. So, now the question is that in these conditions whether there is any possibility to bargain over reducing the pollutions, because this is the maximum level of economic activity or output, that is the maximum level of pollution as well, right. When there is maximum level of pollutions, then the victim is obviously tolerating the maximum level of burden from pollution itself, right. So, that is why now we will be thinking about whether because of this bargain, through this bargain can we reduce the pollution level or not. Now, let us talk about the reducing the level of pollution from Q pi to any point like F. So, now the situation will be just the opposite. So, now the polluter is having the property right, and that is why the victim needs to compensate the polluter, right. So, what will happen? Now, the victim can compensate the polluter to reduce the level of output and pollution from Q pi level to F level, right. And the situation is that at this point, in comparison to F point, the victim has to tolerate a loss of this area F H I Q pi. If the polluter is not going to reduce its pollution and production, then the victim is going to take this much of more pollution damages, right, or you can say loss, right. And if the polluter can be interested to reduce the pollution in the condition that the victim is going to compensate the polluter, right. So, then only the move can happen or the polluter can reduce the pollution level from Q pi to F. So, now the same question we will ask, what is the amount of the bargain or what is the bargain amount that needs to be paid to the polluter, so that the polluter would be reducing its pollution from Q pi to F. So, this is the area. See, the polluter is getting this much of benefit, this is the triangle, okay, and the victim is suffering the whole of this area F H I Q pi, right, this is the loss, okay. So, that means the bargain can happen if this amount, compensation amount to the polluter is greater than the benefit the polluter is getting in terms of this triangle, and it must be less than the loss amount, that is F H I Q pi. So, if this condition is satisfied, then the polluter will be decreasing its pollution and production from Q pi and to F, and by doing so both the parties, the victim as well as the polluter, will be benefited, right. So, that means we can say when we are moving to F point from Q pi, it is a social improvement. Why it is social improvement? It is, we can use this Pareto optimality criteria in order to argue this, right. So, similarly, if you are moving from F to any point like G and finally to Q star is possible, right. And as you understand, this Q star is the social optimum level. By arguing the same logic, by taking the same logic that the victim needs to compensate the polluter, right, the social optimum level of output can be achieved, that is Q star. So, what is the conclusion we are making in the second scenario? So, we are making the conclusion that so long as the bargaining gets established between these two parties, and it will lead to the social optimum level of output and social optimum level of pollution as well. So, from these two scenarios, now you are deducing this, that whether the victim is having this property right or whether the polluter is having the property right, whosoever is holding the property right, there is an automatic tendency to reach to the social optimum, that is Q star level, which is socially desirable, right. So, now we will be discussing that why this Coase theorem may not work. Although this piece of work is a very interesting work both in economics and law, and it has it is a kind of solutions to the many of the externalities we are facing, basically environmental problems we are facing nowadays, but still in certain situations the Coase theorem may not be applicable. So, what is the points or what are the limitations or what are the cases where this theorem may not be applicable? We can take the very assumption itself. So, assumptions are limitations of this Coase theorem. So, in case of the transaction cost, because we assume there is no transaction cost, but in real life if the bargaining and negotiation to happen between or among parties, then transaction cost is a must, right. So, that means in the presence of transaction costs, this Coase theorem may not be effective or may not be applicable. And the second case where this theorem may not work is where there is no full knowledge or full information about the benefits or costs of the externalities. So, in this case also we will be facing the same problem, right. And another case is that in real life we are actually facing lots of paperworks, right. So far the property right and trade rights are concerned. So, this is again one of these the cases where the Coase theorem may not be applicable. And furthermore, we know that this political power of the polluters, it actually sometimes makes difficulty for polluter pay principle. So, when you are saying that polluter will be compensating the victim and the victim will be compensating the polluter, so that the polluter will be reducing the pollution. So, this is a kind of polluter's pay principle, right. But if the polluter is having this influential power like political power, he is associated with political power. So, this Coase theorem may not be effective. And moreover, when you are talking that the victim can also compensate the polluter in order to reduce the pollution level. So, it may happen that victims may dislike this idea to pay for reducing the pollution level itself. And moreover, so far the policies are concerned and policy makers are concerned, sometimes it also happens, many times it also happens, we are observing this policy makers, they are only having very limited information regarding this environmental cost or externality or environmental benefits, right. And because of their having limited informations, they may lack the sufficient knowledge to design this optimal level of externalities, right. So, at this point we can say that first best outcomes, that is marginal social cost with the marginal social benefit may not be possible. So, instead what they are doing, they will be forced to develop a second best policy. What is the second best policy? They can take the opinions from the experts, right, and the experts can set what will be the target or what will be the standard of pollutions, right. And accordingly, the policy makers are assuming that as if this second best policy is going to achieve this first best policies, but it is not the case. And for detail you can go through this original work by Coase. This is the problem of social cost, where he talks about the economics of pollutions, right. And the second one you can follow this chapter 5 from this textbook, Economics of Environment and Natural Resources by Pierce and Turner.